Hey everyone, welcome to another Open Cluster Management Community Meetings. Um, Today we'll be talking about the community feedbacks we got from the Work API enhancement proposal that was presented on Tuesday. So just a quick overview of the Work API. Essentially, it's I can say sort of like a subset of our Manifest Work API, and then we're trying to it's in the cubes multi-cluster cube 6 organization already, and it's there where we're trying to try to bring these API over to a more broader community, and hopefully use that as a way to integrate into OCM as well. So for the status sync enhancement, it's very similar to QGen's status sync feedback, and this is a proposal that was mostly worked on by QGen, and this is what we present to the community. We have a few spec changes that we propose, and then so the spec changes is almost identical to the manifest work status feedback spec changes. I mean the spec. So we should be quite familiar with them already. I don't want to spend too much time here because I want to discuss what the community feedback is and how they want to make some modification to the proposal. But just to give in a quick overview, in the spec, we're proposing we add a status sync rules, and then in the status sync rules, there's in the status sync rule there's a type and a JSON path. And the type, if it's a common fields, then you would treat the resource status for deployment and pods and I think jobs. Those sort of common fields are predefined, and for jobs is a completed, and for deployment are the replicas available, etc. For the JSON, if the type is JSON paths, then you can customize the JSON path here to your liking, so you can grab the status value that you want, and then to store the so once you capture the status, the resource status, you want to store it on the work, and here we're storing we're proposing adding a new field sync values, and each sync value have the alias of the fields, and the field values are there's a type of the values which can be integer, string, and boolean, and then these are that value store. So essentially that is basically the proposal. To give an example is you have the manifest work here. I mean, you have the work here, work CR here. You have the manifest under workload. You have the status sync saying, okay, for this deployment, for this particular deployment, I want to return the common fields as well as this particular JSON path status. And then when it's done, it will show that, hey, the status sync values are these values. So that was a really quick 5 minutes rundown of what was presented, and I want to actually discuss more on the feedback that we got from the community. So it seems like the community thinks going on the spec, the status sync rule here is a little bit too restrictive, where they're only allowed to define a JSON paths, and sometimes they think that it might not be enough to capture what they needed. So they're proposing they would really like to have some type of sort of like a resolver or generator reference So you reference another Kubernetes CR and you get the result of that and then use it. And then in the uh, modern maintainer would like to have a script field here as well, so that the standard way is to do JSON path, but if there's a script like a Lua script, you can use the Lua script to evaluate the rules, and then you capture data that way. So before I continue, I want to pause there. Qiu do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, I think maybe, I don't know. I think script might be okay. I actually, because there was a discussion in the group community about using the CL, um, a common script language to do the column definitions in the CRD. So, but that has not been implemented yet. So I think we probably can also think about that using another type, like using a CL type that you can define a CL script here to return something. But that will be, so to my understanding, that will be a computed status, like what's maybe the user want to know what's the result of available replica minus the replica, something like that, or is there any other?
Yeah, I think that's what Honkai wanted the commodity maintainer. He wanted a more scripting language so that he can sort of calculate, like you said, perform some calculation, and then dump the results into the status, the manifest condition resource status.
But that will also be a single value, like you can, for example, you can parse a string, or you can do some calculation or do a logical calculation, like if you have multiple Boolean value, you can do and or all things. Is that what they want?
They sort of jump ahead here. They sort of don't want just a Boolean value as well, because in the meeting, and Josh, please keep me honest. I think I think some of the feedback we got was this status sync here is too different from the actual resource status. So it's not, for example, there's no it's available. This is an alias for capturing the resource status, but there's no is available actually present in the deployment status. So they I think the general feedback was they would prefer this to be more closer to the resource status, but maybe not to capture the whole thing, because we did mention the fact that, hey, it's going to be a big payload. I mean, it's going to lead to a scalability problem. They say even if it's not the full object, if it can be a subset of that object, it should be okay. Or so they essentially they would prefer this as a var extension, similar to the how we define the manifest, and then they want to put whatever in the resource status in there. But I mentioned, and in the proposal you mentioned that, and I repeat it as well, that it's very hard for the consumers to use the var extension, right? There's no predefined schema, so how do you parse that? But I didn't really get really get a good response from them regarding that. They just think that this is a little bit too restrictive. And also, one of the example they brought up was array. Like we don't have an array, and I didn't really have a good answer to that. I just said if it's an array, then you just parse it yourself and dump it into a string or integer or boolean. So that's another feedback that we got. So I guess QJ, do you think it's okay to maybe update the proposal so that we have a var extension here as well, or you would prefer that we continue on with sort of like a specific type, but somehow mold it into closer the resource status? Because that seems to be the feedback we got.
I I think the raw extension is um I because previously even in when we defined the work API there were several comments from the community, especially in the Google, that they think raw extension is very unstructured schema. So that could be pretty dangerous. So because we cannot validate or anything about the raw extensions, it's just like you have a string. So instead of putting a raw extension, we can just say, hey, this is a string of the past JSON of the status. Just put it there. That has no difference than raw extension actually. Um, but yeah, so that's the reason I think maybe it's not a good idea to put the raw extensions there because it's just unstructured. So I'm interested in something maybe we need to think about that. Like if there we probably how can we construct a structured schema and that is dynamic enough for the different status of the resources. Like, could we have a dynamic created CRD when a user, for example, when the user say I want some status of a resource, example, when they say I want the status of the deployment, we create another CR dynamically on the hub that to to fit the schema of the deployment status. Is that some option that we do?
Do do you mean dynamically created, or is it pre-created and then we reference it? So you're saying if it's a deployment kind, we dynamically generate a schema type of CR and then reference it?
Yeah, that's just my that's just my initial idea that, for example, when the user in the work API is saying that I want a status return in a way of the deployment status, and maybe we could create another CRDs on the hub with a status field in that, but it is a deployment status schema in that CRD. So, so when the work agent updates the status, it updates the status to that CRD.
But then wouldn't you need to create a lot of CRDs based on each kind of resource status that you want to return? or is that just a temporary thing and gets cleaned up later? And and if Min Kim is here, no, Min Kim's not here, and Min Kim doesn't like the they mentioned the limited type away, no away. Oh yeah, so and I remember Min Kim mentioned the fact that he doesn't like to create too many CRDs as well, just the security concerns on them. So, but I guess that's a good idea because then we know this for sure the structure of the status that's been returned. But it seems, yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's maybe it's not a good option. But I still want to know the reason that we want to the use case, like why we need is the just the status of the reason that we want to return the status of the resources. It's just like it's easy to integrate with because this status is some existing things um that the existing controller can use. I mean, the reason that why could you? I'm still a little bit confused about the reason that they just think that it's a limited type, right? That we can only support JSON, string, and Boolean. That's the major concern for that.
Um, Josh, can be honest, was that the major concern? I know they mentioned it, and I did mention this is probably closer to an implementation detail. But
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not the. I don't think it was the major concern either. It was just, they were looking for the more support. It was more along the lines of what you were saying, that they didn't like the sort of status way we were showing it, and they were looking for something that resembled more the primary status that it was pulling from.
So what is the reason why you can't just take the status directly from the deployment and copy the whole thing over?
it's mostly due with the scalability issue. Like the status can grow quite big, and if there's multiple work, and then it adds on to the payload, and then eventually, it'll overload the API server. So usually, when you look at the status, you're probably only interested in a few fields, and you don't care the whole entire stack. So the idea was to just pick the fields that you're actually interested. So then, so you limit the sort of like the object size. Um, who else is on here? How are you on here? How do you have any opinion regarding this? Sorry, put you on the spot. If you don't, it's okay.
Yeah, I
I
think the
guess my
major concern about using raw extension is it's just unstructured. So we can basically so there's no protection on if we put the raw extensions in the status. Um,
what are
like
you
when
protecting
you have
against?
a malicious work agent that can easily break the hub by by putting a lot of things in the raw extensions. And
How
they
would
can,
it break the hub?
yes.
Yeah, how would it do that?
Well, they can, for example, malicious work agent can put a lot of, I mean, the raw extension is just like a byte string that, I mean, you can put a lot of things in that. Like you can put the whole status in that, and whenever a status changes, you just put another raw extensions to replace the original one. You can never patch a single field in the raw extension. You just update the whole things into that one. And if there's a lot of frequent update on the status, that will easily create a lot of event in the SAD and break the hubs at CD because of frequent update on the status.
Yeah, I think the patch, though, is an API concept and not an etcd concept. And etcd will just full on replace whatever the JSON or YAML representation, I forget which, of the object after the update, and then it does some deduplication later on, so that it doesn't store exact copies. It just stores the diff. So I'm not sure that that's actually an issue. It might be more load on it'd be more load on the API presumably though.
Yes, yeah. I mean, so for the patchwork, so I think the reason that we have single field is we think that it's more stable, that it will not cause a lot of frequent update on this field. But I think it's hard to control if we have a raw extension.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking what if you had a compromise where you had raw extension, but then you had JSON paths, and whatever the JSON paths that you provide, it would replicate the structure of that JSON path as the status. So the status would look the exact same as, say, what's on the deployment status, but it's just a subset of it, but it's still in the same format.
But how you can protect that? Like, if we just say the JSON path, the user, in the simplest way, they will just put the JSON path as status in that. And if we in that case, I mean, we just return the whole status, all the field in the status back.
Yeah, I mean, as a consumer of this, I would like that option. Right? It's up to me as the consumer to decide what I want returned and what the performance trade-offs are.
So the one I couldn't have a comeback for not having the var extension in the status because in our manifest definition we do use the one-time var extensions, right? So it's not like we haven't been using the one-time var extension already. So Fujian, can you talk a little bit about that? Like how having it in the spec is okay because it's probably a bit safer because it's on the hub side versus the status where it's being populated by the agent on the spoke and managed cluster side.
Yeah, I think the reason is that to me, I think because in the hub side, it's commonly that, for example, the user create the manifest work. Maybe there are some controllers, but I think it is more stable as the status part. But we already see some problem with using the raw extensions, like when the controller create a manifest work, it always need to compare the two manifest and then update. Otherwise, there will be a lot of updating event even when they maintain those manifest works back on the hub. I think in the status, but in general that is just a spec, and spec is supposed to be much stable than the status part because you just put the desired state in the spec part. But in the status part, it could be pretty dynamic, I think. And I think if we have a lot of data in that and any dynamic field in that whole status resources will create an event on the API server, will generate a load on the API server. And we cannot do anything on that. And if there are a lot of agents monitoring the things on the managed cluster status for certain resource and always update frequently, like each periodic update, they will update the status of the manifest work on the hub. That will generate a lot of events, and that will easily kill the SCD on the hub.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Yeah. That's just our original thinking why we do not want to use raw extensions on the status.
Okay. That was basically it. That was I just want to get a community feedback discussion regarding the work API.
I think maybe if we really want to use raw extension, maybe we need to think about more. I mean, how can we protect that how can we ensure that how can we ensure that there won't break the hub in a easy way? I mean, the current values field currently we put here doesn't really ensure that. For example, if a resource on the managed cluster change the available replica frequently, it will also generate a lot of events in this case. But so current design is just to reduce that risk. It doesn't eliminate that risk. But I think if we go with a raw extension approach, we need to find some way to maybe to reduce that risk also.
So, okay. But you don't think that's I think echoing what Matt said, you don't think that's more like implementation or the consumer, he or she, maybe, let me just get the whole thing first and then I'll scale out later, that type of thing. Do we need to really have to sort of protect it at the API level as well? I guess it's the best protection is coming directly from the API.
Yeah, I'd also be curious how often you're planning to update the status or sync the status from the managed cluster to the hub. Because if you're polling, I guess you could do it just less frequent, so that way it doesn't bombard the hub with a lot of status updates. But if you're,
But if
watching,
you have, yeah, we do the polling, but the problem is if you have like 3,000 or 2,000 clusters, it means that 2,000 polling, and for example, currently it's like 30 seconds. We poll 2,000 clusters, and there will be 2,000 updates for single manifest work per 30 seconds. That's
see.
still good.
Yeah, I would like to see that the polling interval be configurable, and then if you can randomize it a little bit too, so like have a range between 30 seconds and 60 seconds or something like that. But that way it's not all 2000 at the same time.
The polling interval actually was brought up as well during the community meeting. But I sort of shot it down saying maybe we should go with the simple approach first, and then we can discuss the finer details, such as polling later. Um, but I'm not sure we want to further add on to the proposal because it's already quite contentious already. Adding another polling spec might be a bit too much, but that's definitely in the consideration as well. It was mentioned in the proposal as well. Thank you, Matt. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Sorry. Go ahead, Kenji.
yeah, I think we have to. I think we need to consider about the scalability even in the API level. Maybe it's not in the schema, but we probably need to, in the proposal, we need to discuss about, well, how can that be protected and how can that be scalable in a way if we use the raw extension.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a answer right now. Maybe we all need to think about that.
Yeah. I will most likely take what we have discussed here and bring it back to the community meetings for another call because I feel like you brought up some great points, Qicheng. Thank you. I
Welcome.
think I think we're a little bit over. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just one more thing. So if you, I think Ming is not here, but if you need also some input from him, we could schedule maybe another meeting next week to discuss with him also.
Okay, I'll schedule for next week as well since we don't have a topic right now. Thank you. And just before everyone leaves, there was another quick topic that I want to quickly ask Qicheng. Sorry to take your time. So we're trying to use the managed cluster set API. If we were to, create some type of helper function for the managed cluster set API, for example, is this managed cluster in this managed cluster set? And then it returns a Boolean true or false.
Mhm.
Where should that helper function land in OCM? Is it does it belong to placement or registration or any comment on that?
Yeah, I think maybe we should put that in the API repo. Maybe a helper function in this could be used by different repos.
Okay, thank you. That's a great suggestion. Okay. Are there any other comments? If not, thank you so much everyone for attending. Have a nice day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.